Okay, it is just after 7 o'clock. Welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. Hopefully you can all hear me okay now. I just had myself on mute. We were waiting for everybody to pop on. So tonight we're going to be talking about sick leave as a unique benefit. So a little bit of background because I do see a lot of familiar faces on. So welcome to all those who've been on our webinars before, and for those of you who are new, welcome back. My name is John Mantilla. I'm a co-founder and CEO here at Parco. And at Parco, we help federal employees across the country and around the world plan their retirements and optimize their benefits no matter what stage of their career that they're in. We work with folks at the beginning of their career, wanting to make sure that they've put themselves in the right spot, just starting out with the federal government, folks mid-career who want to maybe adjust things given a life change. And then we work with a lot of folks as they approach or enter retirement to make sure that they're all optimized um, for their future, for the next stage of their life. So no matter what stage of your career that you're in, we work with folks across the country and around the world. I think a lot of you found us on Facebook and through our email list and through friends at work. People are hearing about us from a lot of different places, and we've been all over. We go up and present up in Northern Virginia at different places up there. We were out in California a few weeks ago, presenting to some guys who jump out of airplanes to fight fires, which is pretty cool. And we've been featured in a lot of major news publications that you've probably heard of. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about sick leave. We're going to talk first about what sick leave is, what that is as a benefit. We'll talk about its value, so how you can get the most value out of it. We'll talk about your sick leave magic numbers. That's something we're really excited to kind of introduce this concept, and then also to like show you how you can use our platform to determine your sick leave magic numbers. And then we'll conclude with some takeaways and some major talking points for you to know. Um, our goal for these presentations and for these webinars is always that they're really valuable for you all. So hopefully you all come away with something tonight that's like, hey, look, I never heard that before. I finally understand something that had always been a little bit of a mystery to me. So let's first start by talking about what is sick leave. So, at Parker, we say this all the time that federal employees are different. You guys have unique benefits available to you as a federal employee that most Americans don't have. And in particular, you guys have two different types of leave. You have annual leave and you have sick leave. Most Americans now, if you have friends or your spouse or colleagues or family members who are in the private sector, 9 times out of 10 now, they just have paid time off or PTO. Well, as federal workers, you have annual leave and you have sick leave. Now, annual leave is a lot like PTO, right? That you can use that for anything. You can use it to take a vacation, to go on trips. That's personal time that you get to take off. Sick leave is different. This is specific leave that you have that can be used for health issues. And so it can be used for things like personal medical needs, family care and bereavement, family care for health conditions. So if you have a family member who needs your help, and then even things like adoption related purposes. So it's meant to be for personal health care. And what's really powerful about sick leave is that there's no limit to how much you can accrue. So what does that mean? Well, we've had folks that we've worked with who have worked for, decades for the government, and they've accrued thousands of hours of sick leave, meaning they've never really used their sick leave while they're working. So some folks we've worked with that have two, three. I even had a client one time who had 4,000 hours of sick leave. Now, I think he had over 50 years of service. That's basically like 2 years worth of leave. So you accrue this every pay period that you don't use it. And some agencies, notably the post office, will advance your sick leave to you at the beginning of the year. So you can have that leave available to you at the beginning of the year. So it's a different type of benefit. So when you're thinking about different ways that you can use it and what the terms are for when you can use it and how you can use it, if you have personal medical needs, you can use as much sick leave as you want. So what does this mean? Well, if you need to get knee replacement, or if you get really sick from COVID or the flu and you need to take weeks off at a time, or we've had clients, unfortunately, that had like cancer, things like that, and they need to take an extended period of time off, there's no limit to how much you can use your sick leave for your personal medical needs. Then there's also things like your general family care and bereavement leave. So if you had a family member pass away and you need to take care of things or take time to grieve, or if there's a family member of yours who needs your attention and time because they're sick. If you have a sick child, you can use your sick leave for that. Now they tend to have some limitations on that. You can use up to 13 work days. Um, you can use up to 13 work days a year for that. Though we do know that some places are a lot more flexible than these hard limits. And then there's things like FMLA. So let's say that you need to take time off, an extended period of time off, because this happens all the time where we have clients that say, "Hey, look, I have to take a month off because my mom's moving into an assisted living facility or a nursing home, and I need to, she lives out of town, so I got to go travel to do that." Or I have a sick father that I have to take care of for several weeks at a time. You can use FMLA to take care of that, and there's more flexibility with that. But that has to be the standards for that are a little bit higher. They have to have a serious health condition. And I'll answer any questions that come in, certainly at the end. So when it comes to sick leave, that's kind of what it is. But people ask all the time, like, how valuable is this sick leave? Like, what's the best thing for me to do with this? So we always like to use this example of DHA Darla. She has 20 years of service with the government. She makes $70,000 a year. She has a high three of $68,000, which is used to calculate her pension. And she has 174 hours of sick leave. Now, if Darla retired with this sick leave, any unused sick leave can count toward a portion of your pension. It can increase your pension. So in Darla's case, let's say that would add an extra month of service to her time in service, which based on her high three would increase her pension by about $5 per month, $4.72 per month. That is not bad, right? Like that's $5 a month. I would never complain about having an extra $5 a month. However, if instead of retiring with that sick leave, Darla used that sick leave before she retired, she would effectively get paid her regular wage and salary to not be at work. Based on how much she makes, she'd get paid almost $6,000 to use that sick leave before she retires. In addition, if she's using that sick leave before she retires, she's going to get credit for that month that she's off on sick leave. So we always recommend clients, folks we work with, members of our platform, to use their sick leave if they can before they retire, than retiring with it. It's always our recommendation. You always get more value out of using your sick leave than retiring with it. A benefit like annual leave, which we're not really going to talk a lot about tonight, um, different story. There's a cash value to it. It's way more valuable to keep it, and there's strategies for why. But for sick leave, you always get more value out of using it than retiring with it. So then you might say, well, John, like I know I've got some sick leave, Parco. I've been trying to figure out how to use my sick leave. I've been hearing about this idea that there's a use or lose balance. Like, what is my how should I strategize this sick leave as I approach retirement? 2 years away, 3 years away, maybe a few months away from retirement. What are some what are the ways to make the most of this benefit? Well, at Parco, we call it your sick leave magic numbers. And this is based on how OPM calculates and credits your sick leave upon retiring. So there's a couple things you need to know. And our platform does this for everybody who does this. So everybody on tonight's presentation, every member of our platform, you can find your individual sick leave magic numbers. And I can also, we're going to explain it here in an example. So the things we have to know are your date of hire. So this is your service computation date. We need to know what your retirement date is, and then we need to know your current sick leave balance. If we know those things, we can determine your sick leave magic number or your sick leave magic numbers. And the questions are, how will this sick leave affect my pension, and how many hours should I plan to use before I retire? So, everybody knows their service computation date, or that's an easily findable number. But what about the day I'm retiring? Well, for FERS employees, it's always best to retire, and we've covered this in previous webinars, on the last day of the month. And it has to do with how OPM calculates your guys' pensions. And basically, by retiring as close to the end of the month as possible, it reduces the amount of time that you, as a FERS employee, need to wait to get your pension. So every FERS employee has a different service computation date, but we know that almost all of them are going to retire at the end of the month. So somebody like Federal Frank, let's say his SCD is Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May, 1990. And he's planning to retire at the end of this year, right? The end of the month, 12/31, 2026. He currently has 350 sick leave hours. And he's wondering what his sick leave magic number is. Well, when OPM is calculating how they're going to use your sick leave and it counted towards your retirement, we have to first think about how OPM calculates your years of service. So in Frank's case, he was hired on the 5th of a month. So every time the 4th of a month rolls around, that completes a month of service for Frank. Right? So every time the 4th of the month rolls around, that completes a Frank month of service. However, we know as a FERS employee, he's going to retire on the 31st. So when we look at that math, he doesn't get all the way to the 4th. So, absent anything else, there would be 26 days that he worked that he wouldn't get credit for. So, if you're retiring at the end of the month, what we would, right, we would want you to have been hired. Your ideal hire date under this paradigm is the first, right? Because every time the end of a month rolls around, that completes a month of service for you. So, how do we make it look like you were hired on the first? Well, OPM uses your sick leave to round off your months of service. So, here's how they do it. And before we get into the math on this might seem confusing, and it kind of is. But you don't have to worry about how the calculation works mechanically. Our platform will do all this calculation for you. But we always like to explain kind of like how the sausage is made. Because for some of you, this might seem kind of crazy. So what they do first is they take your planned retirement date. So in Frank's case, it's 2026, the year. The month is 12 December, the 31st, the end of the month. Then they subtract out your service computation date, 1990, May 5th. So in Frank's case, he has 36 years, 6 months, and 26 days of service. Right, tracking so far? Cool. Now, as a FERS employee, you get credit for every whole month of service. So we're going to convert that 36 years and 6 months into just months. So he has 438 months of service and 26 hanging days. If Frank retired with no sick leave, basically he would have worked those 26 days for free. They're not going to get any pension credit. Now, we don't want that. So the first thing we need to do is to figure out how much sick leave does OPM need to round off these 26 days to add an extra month. And this amount is what's called your sick leave key. So, how do we calculate that sick leave key? We take 30, which is basically the number of days that OPM assumes are in a month. We subtract out 26, and that gives us 4 days. That's our sick leave key that we need to know to round off his first month of service. Next, knowing that key value, we have to refer to the OPM table to determine how many hours of sick leave are required to round off and equal those 4 days. This is the table OPM uses to determine the number of hours required. Now, what's kind of crazy about this table is kind of crazy and complex, is you'll notice that not every number is on this, right? It goes from 0 to 6 to 12 to 17 and all these different things. So in Frank's case, remember, his magic number, or his sick leave key value is 4. So let's go look at 4. So we look at 4, we need 4 days worth of leave. We look at the cell to the immediate right of that, and it's 23 hours. So you might think to yourself, okay, I need to use 23 hours of sick leave to round off that first month. Well, here's what's kind of cool. You actually don't need 23 hours. According to the OPM handbook, if you retire with a number not on this chart. They will round up to the nearest number. What does this mean for you as a federal employee when you're trying to strategize your sick leave? Well, when we look at this table, what that means is in Frank's case, we actually just need to go one before and then do plus one. So instead of needing 23 hours to round off that first month, we actually only need 17 plus one, 18 hours to round off that first month of service for Frank. And again, remember, this is based on his date of hire, his service comp date, his retirement date, and his current number of sick leave hours. So for Frank, the first magic number for his sick leave is 18 hours. After that, we need to just count off whole months of service. Now, what's kind of crazy is that I would love to be able to sit here and tell you, hey, look, a whole month of sick leave is 174 hours. And that is generally true. But according to the OPM table, which they use to calculate how much sick leave you need, there's one value between 6 months and 7 months worth of leave where they only need 173 hours. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. And this is what our platform does for you. So, how will this work for Frank? How will OPM use his leave? So, Frank has 350 hours of sick leave at retirement. And he has 438 months of service. First thing we're going to do is we're going to round off that first month of service by using 18 of those sick leave hours. That leaves him with 332 sick leave hours. Now he has 439 months of service for his pension calculation. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to subtract out another whole month of service if we can. The first whole month requires 174 hours of sick leave. 174 is less than 332, so we can do that. We subtract that out, so that adds an extra month of service to his time in service. Now he has 440 months that will be used for his pension calculation. The remainder is 158 hours. That's since 158 is less than 174, we can't subtract that anymore. That's his use or lose sick leave hours. So in Frank's case, if he's trying to optimize his sick leave based on his planned retirement, we'd say, hey, Frank, you should try to burn or use at least 158 of these hours. What does that mean like in reality? Well, 158 hours divided by 8 hours in a workday means that he needs to take off about 19. I don't know why it says Dave here. Take off or use about 19 days worth of sick leave. And so think about those dynamics, right? It's based on your hire date, your service comp date, your retirement date, and how many hours you have. So what's really nice is that our platform, based on your values, will look at your values and tell you your sick leave magic numbers. So if you look at this column on the left here, you should these are the numbers you should try to retire with, but not less than. And it'll also tell you how many days of leave, and you can also have there's a toggle to convert it to hours. How many days or hours worth of sick leave you need to use to get to that number. We find that really, really helpful for a lot of folks because, you know, it's kind of complex, and it can calculate this for you, and it'll also account for the fact that you might accrue some leave, especially if you're not retiring soon. So we've gone through this really unique benefit, talked about sick leave tonight. So what are the good checklist items to take away? First, determine how much sick leave you have. Look at your pay stub, look at your leave and earnings statement. Determine how much sick leave you have. Then find your sick leave magic numbers, and they're unique for every person. Then make a plan to use your sick leave before you retire. I had a client once, she got one knee replaced, then she recovered. She got the other knee replaced and recovered, and then retired. She took off like 7, 8 months using all the sick leave she'd acquired and then retired. If that's practical for you and that's possible for you, that's a great way to use that benefit. And then if you create your account on the Parco platform, it can do all these calculations for you for your leave and a whole lot more. I know many of you already know that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open things up for questions. As always, it's a pleasure to present to you all. And I do see a couple that came through tonight. So the first question from Larry is there a minimum hourly increment for sick leave? It's 1 hour. So I have had some clients tell me, hey, I'm going to take a half day or I'm going to use a couple hours of leave to go to the doctor at the end of the day. So I've seen situations where people are able to use 1 or 2 hours of sick leave. Um, I don't think it's the most common way people do it, but I have seen it happen. How did you all find the presentation tonight? I know sick leave is kind of an esoteric benefit. It's not the thing that most people talk a whole lot about, but it's actually one of the more powerful benefits that you have. Were the slides clear? Was everything intelligible? So there's a question about in order to burn an entire month of sick leave, don't you have to have a serious situation? Can you really say I don't feel well? Well, I'll say that this is one of those things that really is dependent on where you work. I've worked with some folks where they say, hey, look, our office and our manager kind of knows the deal when it comes to sick leave as folks are approaching retirement, and they're pretty accommodating. There's other folks, and especially depending on the job that you have, where that may not be practical. And we're aware of that. That's why we always say, look, if you can use as much sick leave as you can, great. But if you can't, you should at least try to get as close to, but not less than, one of these magic numbers. So it's a great question, John. Yeah, and Larry kind of like piggybacking on that. There's a lot of places I know, especially with the post office, they're really, really trying to measure every single thing you guys do there. So it's become harder for some folks to use sick leave than it was in the past. And that's why it's like, hey, look, like you should use it when you need it. You should use it when you need it. Diane asks, uh, for 12 weeks of FMLA, can you take that every calendar year or is that just every 12 months? That is a really good question. And Diane, if you let me get with my team on that, I'm going to get an answer for you. It's a really good question. Let's see. It looks like it's per rolling 12-month period, Diane. All right, I'll keep the lines open for a few more minutes just to let folks keep answering their questions. Sorry, asking their questions. I guess I'm the one answering them. And yeah, Larry, it looks like on our from my research that the FMLA resets every calendar year. It looks like a 12-month period. Oh, but then it says every year. Let's see. Let me find North Torres for sure. Every 12 months. And it's based on employer can choose. Let me see how the federal government does it. Okay. So to correct my thing from earlier, it's every calendar year. So the federal government organizations have the discretion about how they enforce FMLA. The federal government does it on a calendar year basis, Diane. Haven't been asked that question before. So thank you all. We've been asked most questions. Oh, nice. So Chris mentions that he has a tracker that auto calculates his leave and plots a burn down. That's something we're also building in our platform too. That should be ready here this week or next. Because you're accruing leave too. Because we've had some folks say, "Hey, look, I'm retiring in the next few years. my boss is very accommodating or my workplace is very accommodating, I'd like to just, you know, I'm going to try to use my leave or just start taking time off. Um, what's the date I could just stop going to work, and based on the accrual and the number of leave I have, I get to a perfect number. Um, our platform will be able to do that calculation here very soon as well. So I'm glad you have that tool, Chris. Sounds great. Sounds great. Yeah, everybody has their magic number, but I always mention that the ideal number of sick leave really to try to retire with is zero. Um, Zero is like the best magic number. Um, you get the most value for it, and then uh, after that, it's increments of based on your based on those factors we talked about. And there's a question you can't no one can speak, but I can answer questions on the chat. I can respond to the questions you guys post in the chat via text. Yes. So Chris, the only what do you know what your service computation date is, Chris? I can tell you what your first magic number is. Just that I can't have that stuff memorized. Actually, you know what, Chris? If you tell me what your service computation date is, I can tell you what your magic number is based on the table. It's incredible they use this table and not a formula. It always blows our mind. And like there's increments in here where it's 173 and then it goes to 174, and the fact that it's like not consistent is just oh wild. Okay, so you were hired on the 11th. So in your case, your first magic number, Chris, will be 59. Um, we're next to 10. Um, so it says 58 plus one would be 59. So in your case, Chris, 59 is sort of like the first magic number for you. Larry, that sounds like a good strategy to us. Um, again, you mentioned the challenges that sometimes different workplaces have, but if that's possible, you should definitely do that. I'm reading this question that came through. So there's a question about I have over 1,200 hours of sick leave. Before this meeting, I thought it would be a good idea to keep accumulating and it would add months to my retirement. Um, so it will add months to your retirement, sir. But if you have the opportunity to use it before you retire, you're going to get a lot more value out of that time. Because think about it, if you retired with 1,200 hours of sick leave, that's going to increase your pension by what is that number? About 6 months, which isn't bad. Depending on how much you make, that's going to be an extra 30 to 80 bucks a month, um, which isn't bad. But if you took half a year of work off, let's say that you work at the post office and make $60,000 a year, that's half a year's worth of salary is 30 grand. So most people we work with would rather get paid 30 grand to not be at work for 6 months than to get an extra 60 bucks a month in retirement for the rest of their life. So Larry says, does that make sense, Lewis? Larry, so your first magic number, you were hired on the 20th. So in your case, 19. So we go to 110. So yours is 111 will be your first magic number. If you were hired on the 30th, an interesting question, Patricia. You really don't have to worry about it. like in the sense that like there's no like initial round off magic number. So in your case, since you were hired on the 30th, uh, hired on the same date, um, our calculation will tell us, okay, you need to retire with either 0 or 174 or 348, just this top row here. You're hired right at the end of the month. Yeah. So Larry, kind of, if you're using sick leave at the end of your service, isn't that getting a dual benefit? One for getting paid and two counting toward a month of service. Is that correct? Yeah. That's why we always say it's more valuable to use the sick leave because you get paid to be on the sick leave, but then you're also getting service credit time for the time that you're on sick leave. So again, for some folks, they need to retire or it's not practical for them to use it, and they retire with it and a good portion of it counts toward their service and it increases their pension, and that's great. But if you can retire with as little sick leave as possible, that is even better because you're going to get credit for the time that you're on the sick leave and you're getting paid for the time when you're on sick leave too. All right, I'll leave the questions open for just a few more minutes. Hey, well, as always, it was a pleasure to present to you all. We'll be doing an encore presentation of tonight's presentation next week. So be on the lookout for that email. Maybe you'll see some changes to the deck as we always try to improve. But you all have a great evening. Oh, Anne has a question right before we left. So you should take your sick time at the end, like getting surgery around your birthday. Um, I would say that you should use your sick leave when you need it. Some people, look, health is the most important thing, right? Like I don't know any client who hasn't told me that. So if you have accumulated 800, 1200, a lot of sick leave, and you haven't needed to use it, that is a good thing, right? Like you don't want to get sick, you don't want to have health issues. However, if you need to use your sick leave, you get a lot more value out of using it. And so, and to your question, I would try to stick, if you haven't needed to use your sick leave yet, I say most of the folks we work with try to use that sick leave as they approach retirement. Like kind of the example of the client I mentioned that was in Maryland, she got one knee replaced than the other, and then she retired. And that was kind of like her retirement transition. So if you're trying to retire at, let's say, 57, and you say, hey, look, I need to get a surgery because I need to get a knee replacement or hip replacement, or I need to get something on my arm, or whatever the case may be, start using that sick leave right in those last few months before you're retiring. Try to get that down to one of your magic numbers, and then retire. A lot of people find that to be a nice, easier transition too. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Da, da, da. Teresa asks, let's see. May your sick you started May 12th. So you started on the 12th. So your magic number, we're gonna look at the 11th here, and then go to 64. Your magic number would be 65. Back on this. Your magic number, Teresa, would be 65. That would be your first magic number. And our platform can do all this calculation for you too. Of course. Now, look, everybody, you all have a great night. If you need anything from us, as always, please reach out to us at Parker. We're always eager to help. And I look forward to seeing you all next week when we go through this again. Have a great one, y'all. Stay cool.